All right, I might kick things off. Um, Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as you come in. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Josephine and I'm managing the Climate Courage campaign at Climate Majority Project. Couple of housekeeping bits. So this event is being recorded and will go out online, but there will be a couple of breakout rooms and nothing that's said in the breakout rooms will be recorded. So anything you say there won't be kept forward or recorded. Um, so this is our second Climate Courage Stories from the Classroom event. The purpose of these events is really to kind of encourage discussion and shared learning around how to talk to young people about the climate crisis, and to give you the opportunity to meet people who have like deep experience of doing so. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing what Gareth has to say, but I'll hold off from the introductions just there. Um, Before we introduce Gareth, we're gonna do a quick kind of check-in and encourage everyone to get to know each other straight away from the off, and to think about, your own experiences with talking to young people about the climate crisis and the difficulties and challenges of doing so. So we're going to put you into quick, just like 3-minute breakout rooms with one other person. And the instruction is to discuss what challenges you personally have faced when speaking to children and young people about the climate crisis. Hi again, everyone. Welcome back. Um, yeah, sorry for dropping you immediately into breakout rooms, especially those who joined late and perhaps didn't know exactly what was going on. But hopefully yeah, got to grips with it. Um, just getting a bit of feedback somewhere. So we don't have time for everyone to contribute, and that wasn't really the purpose of that. It was more just to kind of get people thinking about your own relationships with young people, and how that has manifested. But does we've got time for kind of one or two people to kind of reflect on anything that came up in those conversations. If anyone would like to speak, insights, any volunteers? Meryl, yeah, go for
I'm always willing to speak. If it's about climate education, I'm in my sweet spot. I had a really nice
it.
chat with Tim. It was quick. It was really quick. 3 minutes is far too short
It
to
is, yeah.
introduce yourself and then say what's going on. But Tim works in Tyndall Centre. What an incredible. He's a parent. He's a governor. He's working at the Tyndall Centre. And actually, how connected can he be to the climate reality? We're talking is not, they're not even focusing on mitigation anymore. It's about adaptation, because he's in the area in East Anglia which is going to get flooded. So about working with schools to try and think about how they can be flood resilient. But he's at every level, he's thinking about those young people. And from my point of view as being a teacher in the classroom, about 10% of kids, I would say, have a tendency towards being concerned if you just teach them about the facts. And so it's all about, teaching them the facts, but also then about the skills that they'll need, and then giving them agency to do that, to take action. And that's, for me, that's what I learned in 14 years or 15 years of being a school teacher, that we are in changing times and we
Mm.
need to facilitate action. But a really lovely chat. I could probably talk to Tim for about 2 hours.
Thank you, Meryl. Mark, time for a bit from you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm involved in an organisation called Schools Climate Education South Yorkshire, put on annual conferences for primary and secondary school students in the region. I would be really interested in current research surrounding climate anxiety, because we used to give this quite high exposure and profile in our conferences, and we are doing that perhaps less more recently. My sense also as a secondary school teacher and practitioner in the region is that young people at secondary phase do not have as sharp and explicit climate anxiety as was the case around the school strike period and the years after that, because they're navigating polycrises, and therefore this sense of joining up the dots in terms of their lived reality and the connections with climate. Young people see an intersection of lots of different issues in their experience and don't see things. I don't think, that's why I'd be interested in an evidence base, don't see things so much now through the lens of climate. So they have a range of anxieties that are triggered by a range of different issues, and this becomes one element of that. So I'd be really interested if anybody has any research data on this issue. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Mark. And yeah, later, I mean, it'd be great to hear what you think about the campaign that we're developing, because that is specifically kind of angled along exactly those lines. Sue, I'm afraid we don't have time for you just yet, but later there'll be plenty more time for kind of questions. So now I'm going to introduce Siobhan Curry, who has worked with Gareth at the CPA, who's going to introduce Gareth, and then we'll hear from Gareth.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you. Thank you for coming on such a hot and tiring day. I know it's a cliche, but it really is my pleasure to introduce Gareth. And I've been very lucky to work with Gareth over the last year or so at the Climate Psychology Alliance. Gareth is a clinical psychologist with Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust. So he's based in near Leicester in the East Midlands. He's honorary associate professor at the University of Leicester. And for about sort of 15 months, he's been the youth coordinator at the Climate Psychology Alliance, where he's been working to develop what CPA offers to young people, how to, reach out, how to support young people, how to support those working with young people as well. So it was quite an ask of CPA to sort of ask Gareth to get this going and to sort of really initiate and innovate in this space. But he's definitely done that, and it's great that he's going to be talking to you about that today. So he will tell you a little bit about why CPA chose to kind of focus on supporting children and young people, and on how adults will, how adults can support children and young people. Some of the work that we're doing, including some work for parents as well. So those of you who are teachers and parents might be useful. And I think, Mark, that Gareth may touch on some of that evidence base. But certainly it's something we could talk to you, about and follow up later, because we do sort of focus a lot on the research that Caroline Hickman and Liz Marks did as the kind of basis for how much climate anxiety is an issue. But I know for a fact there's been a lot of few studies since then, so we'll come back to that. So I'm going to hand you over to Gareth now, and he'll take you through the topic of tonight's webinar.
Thanks, Siobhan, and really grateful to be invited to speak on this topic. I'd like to think that I want to represent the youth team in CPA rather than just myself, because most of what I'm going to be speaking about today comes from contributions from lots of members of CPA. For those that don't know, Climate Psychology Alliance, we are a not-for-profit charity with over 800 members, many of whom are therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. But we also have a varied membership, including artists, educators. We've got an active students and young members group as well, which I can speak a little bit about today. And I feel kind of okay and not too arrogant in saying that I think CPA produces some of the richest theory of climate psychology I've come across, and I feel okay saying that because I only joined last year. The work that's been done by members has been really powerful, and the tagline there, "Facing Difficult Truths," is very much about the importance of climate psychology in helping us to recognise that one of the reasons we haven't seen the action that's needed on the climate crisis is because of the emotional overwhelm that comes with facing up to what's happening with our planet. So a lot of the CPA's work is about helping people to sort of process these feelings and feel able to take action without being overwhelmed. So as Siobhan mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about CPA's work with young people today. It's one element of the work that we do, and you can look at the website to get information about some of the other aspects of CPA's work. And Siobhan also mentioned the Liz Marks and Caroline Hickman research that we often use, and here I am wheeling that out again. So this is a study that I'm sure many of you will be familiar with and come across the stats before. It's one of the reasons we do this work is because we know young people are distressed by the climate crisis. So this is a widely shared study in the Lancet that involved a survey of 10,000 young people from 10 nations, a mix of global north, global south countries. They found that 8 out of 10 children and young people are worried that climate change is threatening people and the planet. 45% of respondents felt that explained that distress was so severe that it was impacting on their daily functioning. So it was impacting on their ability to concentrate at school, at work, when they're out with their friends. A lower figure in the UK, 28%. Over half of the young people thought that they wouldn't have access to the same opportunities their parents had. 4 out of 10 were hesitant to have children because of climate change. Over half of the sample thought that humanity was doomed, which is quite a harrowing statistic to read and connect with. And nearly half of children reported feeling dismissed or ignored when they tried to speak about climate change. So our colleague Caroline Hickman, when she speaks about this statistic, says this is, whilst in lots of ways we're powerless to do a lot to make children's future, better. We're not going to be stopping the climate crisis. Something we do have power to do is to actually listen to children and young people and validate their feelings to make sure that they're not being dismissed. I think to Mark's point about young people and children not feeling as engaged with the climate crisis, we are in the post-Greta era now, and I do think it's very hard to separate out children and young people's anxiety from the other things that are going on in the world. There are some more recent research studies, but they're still pointing to high levels of anxiety. And one of the things it might be good for us to think about is why is the ways that young people might still be very concerned about the climate crisis and polycrisis, but might not be showing that concern as obviously. And of course, the children and young people's concerns aren't unfounded. Another reason we are keen to support young people is because the climate crisis is an intergenerational social justice issue. As this chart shows, children born now are responsible. They're not responsible for any of the emissions that are causing the harm to our planet, but they're going to be living with a significant proportion of their lives severely impacted by the effects of the climate crisis. And one of the things that I find most distressing as a parent is the impact of this for my kids. I think it's hard enough thinking about what is happening to our planet and what is going on. But it adds for me an extra layer of thinking about the impact that it's going to have on my children, because I want them to be safe, and it feels horrible that they're growing up in this world. And I think this chart, I'm sure the sort of content of the chart won't be surprising for people coming to this meeting, but it's still a motive to look at. And I invite you to think about the emotions that come up for you when you're looking at this chart. There's lots of different reasons why children and young people's voices are dismissed by adults and that they're not feeling heard. But one of those reasons is because we, as adults, as parents, as educators, we want children to feel happy. We don't want them to be suffering. And when children are reporting their concerns to us, it can overwhelm us, and our defences can come up. We can easily go to problem solving. We're trying to cheer children up or telling them to think about what's in their control, rather than being with them and staying with the emotions that come up. So one of the ideas that can be useful and also can maybe speak to why young people might not appear to be concerned about the climate crisis when they actually are, is the idea of the window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance is used in psychology to explain some of the ways we respond when we're faced with a trauma or an overwhelming event, which I think we'd all agree the sort of climate crisis is a very sort of traumatic event. It's a sort of cultural trauma that we're all facing individually and collectively at the moment. So this illustration on the left was sort of co-designed by one of our members, Joe McAndrews, alongside Ian Long, I think, who does these illustrations of these blob creatures here, and it's been designed to represent this window of tolerance. And the sort of green range in the middle is the window of tolerance. And when we're in that state, we are feeling supported, we are feeling safe, we're able to stay with the emotions and our thoughts that come when thinking about the climate crisis, but without feeling overwhelmed. We feel that there are people around that can hear our concerns and can provide that support, and that we have some agency and control. We can experience joy and the sadness and the worry without being overwhelmed. But moving into the sort of top layer, the sort of red layer, which is red layer of this diagram, which is also represented by the sort of cloud that says blow up on the right of the rainbow. This is when our distress is such that we're not able to regulate it. Our nervous system kicks off and we kind of enter a sort of fight or flight mode where we can't regulate our emotions. We can't we can't sort of regulate our behavior. We're in that sort of constant threat state. We might be experiencing high levels of anxiety, hypervigilance, nightmares, insomnia, etc. But the lower quadrant and the blue range, this also represents people feeling overwhelmed, but responding in a different way. So another way we can respond to traumatic events is to shut off. When we feel powerless to do anything about the threat, we can shut down. We can kind of go into freeze and suppress the emotion. We might see children and young people behaving as if they don't care about the climate crisis, or perhaps deliberately behaving in ways that lead them to perhaps choose to have the hamburger because they want to be they're kind of perhaps coming at this from a sort of more nihilistic perspective of seeing themselves as powerless to do anything. So they might behave in this way that suggests that they don't care about what's happening to the planet. And this idea of a trauma-informed approach can help us. This idea of the climate crisis being a sort of collective shared trauma can help us think about the ways we can actually support young people. If we think about this as a collective trauma, we can start to think about how we can support people from a trauma-informed way. So one of the ways we can support children and young people is by scaffolding the information we give them and using bite-sized chunks. So it's important children and young people let us know that they want us to be giving them the truth about the climate crisis. They don't want us to be hiding things from them. And that there's a real danger that children are going to feel betrayed if we are just telling them that you just need to recycle or use your paper straws, and that's going to kind of get us out of this situation. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the information we're giving is sensitive to their intellectual, emotional, and social development. We can't just bombard children and young people with the truth, because it's going to overwhelm them, with all the information, because it's going to overwhelm them. And one of the ways we can kind of get around this is by being young person led. So rather than focusing on educating children, giving them the facts, we can be curious with them, explore what their thoughts are, what their views are, what their feelings are, and give space for their worries, their hopes. Really important is that we provide containment and emotional resonance. So by containment, what we mean is giving a space for children to share their feelings, their thoughts, their worries, without us being overwhelmed. So we need, as adults supporting young people, to stay in that window of tolerance ourselves. We need to be able to hear children's feelings and their distress and their emotions, without trying to dismiss those feelings, without jumping straight to problem solving, but just to validate those feelings. This obviously is going to require us to do some of our own emotional processing in order to be able to stay with children and young people's feelings, because we need to recognize that we will all find it hard to contain our feelings, and if we can't contain our emotions, we're going to struggle to provide that containment and support for children and young people we're working with. We need to avoid locating problems and solutions with young people. So the problem isn't young people being distressed about the climate crisis. Climate anxiety isn't the problem. The problem is the failure of systems to take action. Young people are also gaslit. They are often told that their generation will solve the climate crisis. At the same time, they are more likely to be dismissed and not listened to by adults. And it isn't young people's responsibility to solve the climate crisis. They need us, adults with more power, to be taking action. So another thing we need to be doing is taking action ourselves. It's no good telling children and young people that we're worried about the climate crisis too, and we hear them, if they're not seeing those with more power around them taking action. So yes, let's act with children and young people and think about actions that we can support them with, we can help them with, but we also need to think with them about what they want us to be doing and letting them know about actions that powerful other people are taking around the world. I think one of the theories of change that Climate Majority projects speak about is this idea of the importance of feeling that you are part of a larger movement, that there are lots and lots of people around the world taking action, can help people move into that sort of window of tolerance, that area where they can feel they can engage and take action without being overwhelmed. Finally, we had a seminar last week with Caroline Hickman, and one of her big drives at the moment is for us to push to get the climate crisis recognised as a safeguarding issue. That we need to recognise the failure to take action to address the climate crisis ought to be treated the same as any other safeguarding issue that causes significant harm to children and young people. So that's something we are trying to support. And there's a link there to climatechildprotection.org, who are doing a lot of work to try and promote that perspective. So in terms of thinking about the work that CPA are doing to support young people, the work has been enabled through a grant from the Robert Ho Family Foundation. So some of the stuff we've done or members have done have developed toolkits to support young people themselves, such as the Dare to Care toolkit there. There's been various guides and toolkits written for parents and educators to support them in thinking about their helping children to process their emotions and their feelings when it comes to the climate crisis. We have, as I mentioned at the beginning, a young members and students group. So young people and students can sign up to CPA for a concessionary rate of £9.60, I think it is. And the group's only been going less than a year, but is meeting monthly, and invites speakers from different parts of CPA to come and speak to them about different things to do with climate psychology. They provide peer support to each other, and they're becoming more and more involved in all other aspects of CPA, wanting to kind of make CPA more of an intergenerational space than it has been. We offer online youth support spaces and parent-carer circles. The youth support spaces are online spaces that draw on some of the ideas that I was speaking about earlier. They were developed by Joe McAndrews and Rachel Alexander, and they're spaces where we hope to give young adults a space to feel heard, to feel validated, to be able to share what's going on for them without them being dismissed. The parent-carer circles are similar to climate cafe listening circles. I'm sure lots of you might be already familiar with the term climate cafes, but these are spaces where parents and carers can come and speak to their feelings of what it means to be, what it feels like to be a parent in this time of climate breakdown. And hopefully that's validating and containing for the parents. And we also believe then that will have a nice impact for children and young people as well. Because again, if parents are able to process and stay with some of this emotion, it's going to help their ability to be with and stay with what their children bring for them. We offer some training and workshops, both for young people themselves, to support them in understanding climate distress and develop some techniques to manage, live with those feelings about them overwhelming them, and also training for people who are supporting children and young people as well. We've also got a few other new initiatives. So we've got our first residential coming up at the end of this month for young adults, and we're looking to develop a new online support group as well, which we'll be advertising shortly. So those were the slides I was going to go through. Josephine, do you want me to go straight into the exercise now? Yeah, so we had an exercise that we were going to offer for you to do, which is to kind of give you an opportunity to practice doing that emotional containment, to practice validating emotions when to practice doing it with each other, so that it might be easier to do when you do it with children and young people. So this is the instructions for this activity might be complicated or are complicated. This is based on an exercise that we run in our youth support spaces. So it's adapted from an exercise that Rachel Alexander and Joe McAndrews developed. So you're going to be put into breakout rooms with 3 people. And person 1, you decide quickly who's going to be person 1, person 2, person 3. Person 1 will then have 2 minutes to speak to their own feelings relating to supporting children and young people in relation to the climate crisis. So this is similar to the first exercise you did, but slightly different in that you'll just have up to 2 minutes. You don't have to use all of those 2 minutes. This is much more about your feelings in relation to this. And rather than being a conversation and other people chipping in, we'd like everyone else to actively listen. Preferable to keep your cameras on if you're willing to. You're not giving advice, you're not interrupting, you're just trying to be there with the person as they're speaking. At the end of the 2 minutes, and we'll try and use the broadcasting function in breakout rooms to tell you when that's up, we just like the other people to thank the person for sharing and offer a single word or a short phrase to show that you've heard them. What connected for you about what the other person said? What connected with you? What did you hear and what resonated with you? So you're not trying to make the person feel better here. You're trying to just say that you heard them. You get that feeling. And then the idea is we're going to repeat for everyone else in the group. Obviously, this task is quite an emotional task. So it's really important that you only take part in this if you feel okay enough to do so. And if you do want to take part, you can try to be careful about what you want to share, and don't try and go to places that feel unsafe for you. same time, we need to recognise that all feelings are welcome, all emotions are welcome, and there's no correct way to feel in relation to this. Your sadness, your rage, your worry, your joy, they're all welcome. And we're not trying to get each other to think or feel or act differently. We're just trying to acknowledge and say that we hear the other person rather than they should be thinking or feeling in a particular way. I hope that makes sense. And it'd be really interesting to hear how you find the activity afterwards. Are the breakout rooms ready?
They are.
And thank you, Tamsin. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. I appreciate that can be an emotional and difficult exercise. I guess the question I kind of wanted to ask in terms of kind of getting some feedback is how it felt. You know, if you kind of did the exercise and you had other people sort of validating your feelings or saying a word, how did it feel to be on the receiving end of that feedback? Feel free to either unmute or use the chat. Some hearts. Thank you, Don. Some love there. Got some love. That's good. Greta as well. Les.
Yeah, it felt really powerful. Thanks, Greta. I was reflecting sort of part of the reason for this session. You know, we are, and for the Climate Courage campaign, we're sort of reaching out to teachers in particular who are sort of at the sharp end of potentially these kind of conversations. And you know, teachers don't always have the time or the headspace to give to this kind of thing. Well, I think teachers generally, you know, they are very good at listening to their students. But I suppose it's to highlight some of what you're doing, Gareth, and the Climate Psychology Alliance's work. You know, it's there to back up and support teachers as a place where young people can, you know, can find a bit more time and a bit more support.
Absolutely. I'm glad you felt heard, Les, and I think you're right. I think you know, I've never taught in a school, but I can imagine it being very difficult for teachers to be able to provide this emotional containment. But it's kind of very important we do find ways to do it. We can't be teaching about this topic without giving space to validate and process the emotions. Yeah. Thank you, Les. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite interesting to do this as peers together, and then think about how that might work in an education space. So my experience is predominantly with secondary students and in whole class teaching scenarios, and it's extremely unusual in my experience, and this may be me and my age, my teaching style, but it's unusual for me to observe teenagers expressing emotions in a peer context where they're not going to want to expose themselves, and that's quite different probably to primary school. And that's an age and stage developmental thing, and that's fine. But I think that doesn't neglect the fact that it's very important how we approach addressing issues to do with climate, particularly since schools are very cautious about approaching this subject in any way, particularly at secondary, that might open doorways to emotions that they don't want to be addressing directly. So it's a bit of a convoluted answer or response, but I'm really interested about what this means in particularly my own experience in the secondary space. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I think that they're really, really excellent points. It is so hard, isn't it? Because the system is so scared of bringing up this topic, which feeds into this shutting down of the emotion, and feeds into the cycle of also children and young people being less likely to express the emotion because it's going to be shut down. I think your point about teenagers not being, not speaking about the emotions because of not waiting to be exposed is a really important one as well. And I think one of the ways we can provide that containment as well is by naming the emotions we think they might be feeling as well. So one of the things that we do at containment is we're helping the child and young person to maybe make sense of their experience and their feelings. So if a child and young person is speaking about, I don't know, not seeing any point in studying for their exams because things are going to be fucked anyway, what's the future I've got? Maybe sort of trying to name the feeling they might be feeling. That it feels really, I'm hearing some despair there. It sounds really difficult thinking about what you might be facing. We might get it wrong. We might name the emotion wrong, but at least we're trying to acknowledge that feeling. We're trying to listen. We're trying to name the feeling before just trying to go straight into why we want you to carry on studying or what you might still be able to get out from studying. I don't know if that example is useful, but I think there could still be value in trying to find ways for naming emotions and creating space for the emotional processing when we're doing the education. It's much harder to do, and one of the big reasons these conversations are so difficult to do is because these are conversations we shouldn't be having to have with children and people. We shouldn't be having to have these conversations about why we're going into a future where ecosystems are collapsing and the climate's breaking down. This is a normal.
There's a hand up from Sue.
You've got your hand up.
Yeah. My experience working largely in anti-racism and working with the impacts of inequality on global populations with teenagers was through literature and poetry, and enabling them to be able to hear real voices, being able to respond to those real voices, which they would engage with emotionally, both present day and historical, and in parallel, looking at how literature can really inspire awe and wonder for the environment. It can foster ecological understanding and reconnect people to the natural world, which I think is so important. And then they're responding to the stories and the narratives. It's their own emotional responses, but they're not having to say, I feel. And I found that with teenagers, they're much more confident to respond to the words of people. And that engages them at that affective level. It's not about the facts, it's about the actual emotional connection.
That's a brilliant point, Sue. I love that, and the power of poetry and stories for helping people to connect with and speak to the emotion. That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we're coming to the end of my bit because I know you've got some handover stuff to do. We've got sort of resources, etc., on our website. We'll share the slides. Really keen to hear from anyone that's got any thoughts on this topic or any ways we can support work you're doing. It'd be great to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to give a massive thanks to Gareth. I certainly learned a huge amount from that. I'm going to try and put it into practice, but yeah, I'm certainly someone who tends to resort to problem solving and that kind of thing when speaking with young people, so it's definitely going to take some practice. In terms of, we've got a couple of events coming up soon. So we've got the next one of these events is on the 16th of June. We'll put a link to that in the chat, and there you'll be able to meet Hina Dave and Lee Hoth, who are from Climate Adapted Pathways for Education. So they'll be talking about this stuff specifically within school settings. And we've also in June got another event at the end of June, on June 25th, which is the launch of the Climate Courage campaign. So there we'll be talking a lot more about exactly what we're calling for and how you can get involved. So please do sign up to both of those. Les, have I missed anything? No.
Sorry, I was just trying to find the link to the launch event.
I can do that.
I've put a link into Ticket Taylor page for Climate Majority Project, which has got all of the events on the same page. So that link I've just shared.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Tamsin. I not missed anything. I just think the next session we've got is Climate Advisory Pathways from Education, who are working in specific schools and going to tell their story about kind of going sort of deep into, you know, helping schools to work with this subject. But as Josephine says, if people have got other ideas of people doing good stuff in this space, we'd love to hear and try and feature them.
Oh yeah, the final thing to say is that if we're a big part of the campaign going forward is going to be gathering testimonials and stories from people such as yourselves, teachers, mental health professionals, parents, just like anyone who can kind of provide a story that demonstrates, you know, the need for us to consider the emotional toll of educating and teaching about climate, because as we've seen, you know, there's a lot of research about kind of quantifying the need for this, but there's less individual testimonials. And one thing the campaign is trying to do is just gather a really rich kind of database of stories that we can use as a campaigning tool to just really kind of get out there, you know, the importance of this. So I'll put that link in the chat as well. Les has just done so. And if you have any time to kind of think about your own experiences of this, then we'd really, really appreciate that. Brilliant. I think that's all from us, but really, really lovely to see you all. And thanks again to Gareth. See you soon.